Hey, sweet friends, my name is Rachel, and welcome to a new cookie tutorial video. In this video, we are decorating a cookie that I made for a Christmas in July themed set. Now, this is a tropical Santa face, and so you can also use this theme if you are doing a tropical Christmas in December, or you can use it for a Christmas in July themed set as well, or you can take the things that you learned from this video and just use it as a regular Santa and just not decorate his hat in a tropical way. So there are lots of options for you to decorate this cute little Santa. So let's get started. Welcome to Rock City Cookies, where we talk about all things cookies. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video. Thanks for watching. To begin, this cookie cutter is in our Etsy shop. You can find that in the description box below. Or if you are just searching in our Etsy shop and don't need the direct link, you can always look under the holiday related cutters section of our Etsy shop, which our Etsy is Rock City Cookies. Now, with a character cookie, you are going to have to decorate your cookie in layers. So when you decorate in layers, you have to think about what needs to be the first thing that you decorate and then what needs to be the last thing that you decorate, so that you can actually layer your cookie in the same way that you might layer the actual object. So in this case, the first thing that we decorate needs to be Santa's skin. And again, this skin color can be whatever that you need it to be. The client asked for a light tan Santa, but you are more than welcome to have any color skin tone for your Santa. Just make sure that you communicate with your client and see what they request. The skin needs to be first, because if you do the beard sits on top of the skin. The hat sits on top of the face. So when you're layering, you kind of want to make sure you're thinking in that 3D dimensional way. So the skin needs to be the first thing that you decorate. So you are going to outline where his face will be, and then you will flood it. And then with your scribe tool, you can pop out any air bubbles. Those pesky little air bubbles, they can cause holes in your icing, or if you have any air left in your icing, it can cause a shadow in that royal icing too, if it's below the surface and you can kind of see it sitting there. So you want to take the time to pop any air bubbles, and then you're going to let that section dry for a little while. After it has dried and can then be able to withstand the weight of something on top, then you can go back and decorate Santa's little nose by just putting a little oval on his face, and then also filling that in with icing. Now, if your flood icing is not on the thicker side, I do recommend that you use a little bit of a thicker icing for his nose. Otherwise, you could potentially have some cratering where you get a big hole in your icing where it dries and it divots down, or it just cracks completely. So if you have a thicker icing, that'll help prevent that. And so you will do that for his nose, and then you can immediately move on, because that nose is not touching any other section. You can go ahead and start working elsewhere. The other perk to doing Santa's face first before you do the other sections is that is also in the middle. So by doing that, you can work on the bottom of the cookie and you can work on the top of the cookie at the same time after his face is dried. So that's another thing that you need to think about when you're layering your cookies and all the different steps. If you have multiple steps to flood an entire cookie, is also think about, what can I do now so that I can also work in more sections later and them not touch. So I opted to do Santa's beard next. So you're going to outline that, and then you are going to either flood that section, or in other Santa cookies I've done, I've actually used really thick icing, and I've cut a big hole in my bag, and then I kind of swirl my icing around, and I'll actually put a picture of other Santa cookies I've done where I've done this technique, and then it kind of has a fluffy curly beard. But for this cookie, I opted to go with a smooth beard for Santa. So that means just outlining and flooding it like normal. After I've done his beard, I want to go up and I'm going to start working on the red part of his hat, and I'm going to do a wet on wet technique here. So you are going to have to work a little quickly when you're doing a wet on wet technique, because you don't want your icing to start to dry and crisp over while you're doing this technique. So I'm going to have all of my icing ready to go before I even start flooding this section, but I am going to outline it with red, and I'm going to flood with red right away. But I also want to make Santa's hat look like it has some tropical flowers on it. So I'm going to use white dots on his hat to kind of represent where each one one of these flowers is going to go. And then I'm going to use my scribe tool to pull in the red icing on that wet dot, and it is going to create a flower effect. So you're going to start with your scribe tool or a toothpick or whatever sharp object that you're wanting to use to help create this effect. You're going to start at the outside of the dot and you're going to drag the icing inward. And by doing that, that's bringing that red icing that's a part of his hat in towards the middle of the dot. After I have done each one of those lines, I have a paper towel in my hand and I'm wiping off my scribe tool with the paper towel. And then I go back and I do the next, and then I drag the next line of icing. And then same thing, I'm going to use my scribe tool. I'm going to start at the outside of the dot, work my way in, wipe off. Outside of the dot, work my way in, wipe off. And if you do all 4 sections, then you have 4 petals for every single one of your dots. Now, again, you're going to be working really quickly because your icing is drying. As you're working, your icing is drying and it's wanting to crisp over on the top. And as soon as that starts to happen, you don't get such a clean and polished look. So work very quickly while you're doing this. I prefer normally while I usually have my ceiling fan on while I'm working, while I'm doing a technique like this where I have to be really fast, I actually turn off the fan just so that that's not also drying out that icing while I'm working just for this step. Now, the other tip I want to make sure that you know is when you are doing this kind of dragging to make these flowers, don't go too deep into the icing. If your scribe tool is too far down, then you're going to start pulling too much icing towards the middle. And so then your icing is going to get a little bit wavy. It's not going to be a smooth finish. So literally the very, very tip of my scribe tool is what I'm using to drag the icing. I'm not going very far at all into the red part of my icing. Really just you're skimming the surface just to bring a little bit of that red color in and to kind of transform that white dot into flower petals. But I didn't really think that that was enough to make it look fully tropical, like a tropical Santa hat. So I also wanted to add a little bit of orange to our flowered hat. Now I do have orange all elsewhere in the set too, so I am incorporating a little bit of that orange color that I'm using in other places. And so while my icing is still wet, I'm now going to go back and I'm going to add an orange dot in the middle of each flower. And I'm just going to do a grouping of orange dots in the negative space, in the empty space on the red hat as well, just to kind of add just a little bit more detail to that hat. And I prefer when I do groupings of dots, I prefer to do them in an odd number if I can. So I'm going to choose to do my grouping of dots in 3s all along the hat. Otherwise, if you just do one dot here or there, I thought it would look too polka dot-ish. So instead, I wanted to do groupings of dots so it felt a little bit more purposeful in the design. And that's it for our little tropical portion of his hat. So now you can let that dry and then we'll come back and finish off the rest of Santa's hat as well as the other details on his face. Now, I wanted to give Santa some sunglasses. You definitely do not have to give Santa any sunglasses, but I wanted to give him some sunglasses for this tropical look. And I wanted to kind of do it in a 3D kind of look. And so in order to accomplish that, I decided I wanted to paint on the lenses of his sunglasses so that the frames popped and it looked more real. It looked more like sunglasses than if you had royal icing on the inside and royal icing on the outside. And so it all looked like it was the same level. This way, the lenses sit backward and the frames sit on top. So I'm just using a thick black royal icing and I'm using a paintbrush and I'm just going to use that paintbrush to kind of spread that icing where I want it to go. And I am choosing to project my image onto the cookie while I'm working, just so that that gives my paintbrush and my icing a specific place to go where I know I'm going to frame out the lenses later. And it also helps to keep, by projecting the image onto my cookie, it also helps to make sure that the left lens and the right lens match and that they're same size, same width, all of that good stuff. So I'm just going to do both sides. Again, I'm just using that thick icing and I'm just using that paintbrush and I'm just smoothing it out. It's not perfect. It's not going to be a perfect lens, but I think it's going to look pretty cute when it's all done. And that way it also will dry really fast because it's a thick icing and it's thin and it's just laid down flat. So it dries really, really quickly. And I'm able to do the final part of his sunglasses really fast after I've used my paintbrush. And this is another reason why I did his nose earlier on into the process, is because I didn't want to accidentally have his nose touch the lenses of the glasses and potentially blend together or look funky if they were both still wet. And so this way, by doing the nose earlier, it's had plenty of time to dry. So I don't have to worry about the sunglasses messing up that nose or the nose messing up the sunglasses. They're both independent of one another and they'll both keep their shape. So I'm going to outline, now that I've done the lens, I'm going to outline the frames. And again, my projector's on to kind of give me that guide of where my frames need to go. I'm going to do the outside of the frames first, and then I'm going to come back and just squeeze my bag a little bit harder to fill in the rims of the lenses. And I'm going to go slow because I don't want the bag to accidentally waver. I want it to be pretty smooth on the rims and to kind of have a similar size on both sides. And going slow will help you to have that precision. And I'm just going to keep going slowly back over those sections until I have the amount of icing I want that kind of accomplishes that puff of the lenses. Really helps with that 3D look. And I'm going to have to use my scribe tool because I am going back over and over those sections, and because my icing's a little bit on the thicker side, I am going to have to use my scribe tool to help smooth out those areas and make sure the glasses look nice and polished. Now that my glasses are done, I'm going to move down to the ball of our hat, and I'm going to do kind of a cotton ball-y look. And so I want to just do dots to accomplish that. So I just have a smaller hole cut into my icing bag. If you use piping tips, you can use a size 1 or smaller, and you can just squeeze out and build up that area with dots of icing over and over and over again until you have the amount that you want. So because it's thick icing, it can build on top of each other. It's not going to blend together. So do make sure you have thick icing for this. If you're using flat icing, it's just going to blend all together like one big blob. But if you have thicker icing, which again, you can always thicken up your icing with powdered sugar, just 1 spoonful at a time, really mix it together. If your icing is too thin, it's a great way to thicken it up, and then just rebag your icing. But I'm just going to squeeze dots of white icing all over the ball of his hat and all over the brim of his hat. I don't really know if that's what you call that part of Santa's hat, but we're going to go with it. And you're going to just pipe dots all over. And again, because it's thick icing, I don't have to wait for any drying time. I can just build up that area just by piping 1 dot at a time and just piping dots on top of each other just so that that area builds up even more. After I have his hat done, I am going to give our little tropical Santa a mustache. And that mustache is just going to come out from his nose. Now, I did turn back on my projector just to help give me a guide, but you definitely can just eyeball this. It's just 2 areas coming right down. It's not awful just to pipe it on your own. And I am going to outline it, and then I'm going to use the same icing that I used for his beard, and I'm going to fill that in, and I'm going to use my scribe tool to kind of blend in that outline and the flood and pop any air bubbles. And because my flood icing is just a tiny bit thicker, it's not thin. I do not like thin flood icing. Because my flood icing is just a tiny bit thicker, I'm able to keep that nice puff of icing for his mustache. It doesn't dry flat, which I love. That's my favorite. And that's it. Our little tropical Santa is done. And again, you can use the Santa cutter for so many different reasons and so many different versions of Santa. But if you are looking for a tropical Santa, it's really easy to make any Santa cutter that you have tropical just by changing up his hat and maybe giving him a pair of sunglasses. And that's it for this Santa face for this Christmas in July themed set. There are more designs coming here and on the membership platforms, so stay tuned for those. But until then, I will see you in the next video next week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.